This is Matt. He's a car mechanic, expert on troubleshooting the new computer systems. So he's very knowledgeable about electronics. And I'm Lincoln, and I'm the outboard mechanic. And we are going today to do a Lincoln sync on an early Mark 55, one that did not have the adjustable thing up here. You have to set the engine up quite differently. The timing, the wide open throttle timing is the last thing you set up on these. Okay. Lincoln sync of an early Mark 55. This Mark 55 is the early series that had the connection on the throttle arm, and you have to adjust the timing. Is the last thing you do. You have to set the carburetor first, running in the tank with the tachometer and the test wheel. You got to have both. There's a test wheel, and this has got the choke solenoid, which is not mounted in the top shroud. Those were a little bit different. They're a little bit easier to set up. These older ones are a little bit more difficult. This is the section in the book on it. 3 pages. Basically, you set up your magneto with the splines and so forth. Make sure your timing is correct on the flywheel, if you can find the marks. And then the next thing you do is you stick the thing in the tank and adjust the high-speed needle, both high-speed needles. And then you go to an idle adjustment, and then you go to a linkage adjustment, the pickup, and then neutral RPM, and then timing, maximum spark advance. So that timing is done after you've done everything else. Then your plate is set. This thing right here is set, and you adjust your maximum spark with these sliding locking things right here. Timing the Mark 55. The most important thing is the arrow on the distributor pulley. If you look very carefully, there's a little tiny arrow at the end of my finger. Little arrow pointing, and we will rotate that. This is the tachometer that was used to time these things. It's a Mercatronic, and you need this type of a tack to get an accurate RPM on these things, because newer ones are way too sensitive, and the magneto puts out way too much juice, and it's very, very hard to use the like a tiny tack or whatever, and these seems to work the best. The arrow, which we can see right there, is in alignment with the single line. There's another line over here with an O over it. That's the 235 line, and I'll show you how to line that up. But this is the line that aligns the pulley with the arrow. So the pulley is aligned properly with the #1 piston. We're top dead center, and the magneto is in its proper relationship to that #1 piston. So we're going to be using the Mercury official manual, and Matt here is going to be asking me questions as we go along. The first thing we did on this was to set up the timing belt, so we had the straight line with no zero over it. It lines up with an arrow that's underneath this cover, and you can see it quite plainly. And the first thing we're going to do is have this running in the tank, and we're going to put a screwdriver in our high-speed adjusting needles, and you listen carefully as I do it, and you will hear the engine fade. And when it starts to fade, you've gone past the point of the best fueling at wide open throttle. So we obviously turn it backwards and give it more fuel for about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. Same thing with the bottom carburetor. You can see the screwdriver in there as well. Same thing. If you listen while I'm running the engine, that's the first thing we do in our timing procedure of this engine, is to adjust the high-speed needles. What this is to do is to adjust the carburetor high-speed needles. It is recommended the propeller be removed and the test wheel, which is on it, be installed. The engine will then turn about 52 to 5,300 RPM at full throttle in the test tank, while 500 RPM on the back of a boat. This will permit the accurate adjustment of carburetors for maximum RPM. And you do need to use the tachometer, which we talked about earlier. You can show it to them if you want to again. That's good.
And
This is a tachometer. It's an analog tachometer.
Digital is not.
It's an analog tachometer, and it is not sensitive. The new ones pick up, the magneto puts out way too much juice, and it tends to make the new digital tachometers very erratic. So I really recommend using the old analog type tachometer, of course on 2-cycle. So that's what we'll be using today. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is warm up the engine, and we will get that high-speed adjustment. So start it up.
In reality, this really shouldn't have a load on it when you're making those adjustments.
Correct. It's got a test wheel on it. That's why it's on there.
Right.
Yep. We have not adjusted anything. So, now hold it. Okay, we adjusted the high-speed needles. You heard the engine running. You heard the engine running. It was, the needles are right where I was adjusting them, were right here and right in there. Okay, those are the two high-speed needles, and I adjusted them and went past the point where the engine was no longer running fast. It was leaning out, and you could hear it slow down very, very distinctly. And then I backed it back off to its highest place and then went about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn richer than that.
It's better to be richer than lean.
Absolutely on these, otherwise you'll pre-detonate a piston. The next step, which you can hear us doing, is adjusting the low-speed needles, which you can see right there. And again, you do it the same way. You lean it out, turn it in until it starts to fade, then open it back up. These are very, very sensitive needles, and you can notice a difference quite quickly. Same thing in the bottom one. The bottom one is right here. and you adjust that one as well. So that's the next step. Okay. So the next step in this book is, this is Mercury's official manual, is the next step is idle adjustment. So we're going to talk about idle adjustment. We're going to fire it up and drop it back and get it to give us about 600 RPM. We may or may not be able to achieve that because this engine's just been rebuilt, but we'll try. Okay, to set this thing, we're going to adjust the stop. And the stop's right underneath here. That's 650 in here. Alright, so that says 600, let's see, the engine running at idling speed while in forward gear. Now we want to turn in low speed needle, which are right there. Same place on the bar. Alright. Definitely slow down. Yep. Slow down. Whoops, a little bit too much. All right. And a quarter of a turn is like too much. Yeah, it really is. Okay. All right, shut her off and shut her off and we'll read the next step here. Good, that's how we go. Okay, so we've done the idle speed adjustment. The next thing is the linkage adjustment.